Hey y'all, welcome back to this week's episode of AMA Friday with Amy Miller, Recruiting and Yoga Pants. So this week we are digging in. It's our first kind of deep dive, second video in the high volume hiring series. And so we're digging in a little bit more into first step. When you have a high volume problem to solve, what do? We're going to dive in a little bit. I'm going to start sharing some specific stories and some things that I'm currently living as I'm building out a high volume hiring strategy. So with lots of help and support. Not doing it alone, I promise you that. But we're going to dig in a little bit. If you've not seen last week's video, we just did kind of a quick intro into this topic. And I got to tell you, I shared the video, of course, as I always do, on LinkedIn. So every Friday, video drops. I go create a LinkedIn post, share the video there as well. And we got a lot of comments. There's a lot of really good conversation happening in the comments and a lot of recruiters weighing in with their perspective on high volume hiring and what it really means and what does it look like. And it was great. Like, I appreciate every single person that jumped in and shared their thoughts, asked questions. But I got to tell you, there were some interesting discussions happening. And there's some strong feelings about what high volume is and is not. Now, for me, I tend to use that pretty loosely. I think high volume is if you're hiring a lot of the same or very similar things. That, to me, is high volume. I don't get into, like, is that 10 hires a month? Is that 100 hires a month? I don't really dwell on it that much, but there were a few people that felt very strongly about how we use the term. There was what I can only refer to as some placement measuring happening in the comments. So it was a bit of a wild ride, but all good, all good. There was lots of really great perspectives. And what do I tell y'all all the time? You need to talk to and listen to and get guidance from the recruiters at the places you want to work. So even if somebody was acting crazy in my comments, that's okay, because if that's a recruiter who can get you where you're trying to go, you should listen to them, not to me. I am totally okay with that. All right, so how do we do this? So we know we have a high volume problem to solve. Hopefully we're defining it correctly for the folks in the audience. Never not gonna think that's funny, y'all. Sorry. It was a wild ride. But hopefully, we have this now charter. We know I gotta go hire a bunch of people to do a thing. Okay, what do you do? What do you do first? Where do you start, recruiter friends? I'm going to ask some questions. I want to understand, is this a high volume scenario that is just the nature of this business and this is what we are going to do every week, every month, every quarter, every year for infinity and beyond? Or is this a one-time, I'm standing up something brand new? Or is this peak season? Is this something that we're doing, once a year, once a time, right? So there's even within a traditional high volume model, there's still some questions to ask. There's still some things that we need to understand about how this is going to happen today. Like, what is the immediate short-term solution to this high volume problem? What that looks like 6 months from now, what that looks like 5 years from now, and so on. So this is one of those very important questions that recruiters should be digging into and understanding, like, what is the both short and long-term problem that we're solving? Because your approach is going to be different. Let me give you an example. If you are staffing up a brand new business from scratch, this is more related to what I'm currently doing. Okay, so without getting into too much detail, you can see my LinkedIn profile, see where I work, all that good stuff. I don't hide it necessarily, but looking at that, I'm very transparent that we are newly building out this function. We are newly standing up this hourly workforce to do a very specific thing around assembly and production. Okay, now that is high volume hiring because we are hiring hundreds over the next period of time, short time frame. We've been at it for a bit, so we're, had some success and we're kind of finding our groove and kind of refining some processes and things that we're building and experimenting a bit with. But at some point, the intention is we're going to have this fully staffed factory, and we'll still continue to hire because we're going to have people get promoted, we're going to have people transfer in and out, we're going to have people move on. So we're never going to not hire. But the way that my high volume hiring is being set up is hopefully we have this big initial push for the first year or two, probably. It's probably going to take us a little time to really kind of get everything staffed up that we need to staff up, and then we start continuing. But we're still kind of in those early days of building some of the processes. We're also then finding there are other supplemental teams that also need to start doing their own high volume hiring because they're part of this larger production build is also critical. So there's a lot of like little moving pieces and nuances to this. And that's where we have to, like, before we ever post a job, we have to go, okay, time out, pause, hang on. What are we solving for? What are we solving for short term? What are we solving for long term? And then what are the right mechanisms to put in place to make sure that we're meeting those milestones? Okay, so that's number one. If you're a recruiter watching, I'm going to urge you, before you ever open a role, before you ever talk to a candidate, I want you to really understand short-term, long-term implications of this body of work. There are going to be some kinds of hiring that is just a continual, repetitive, never-ending, I'm always going to be filling these roles for infinity. That is okay. That sometimes often comes with an already established set of processes. There's already a mechanism in place for that kind of hiring. I used the call center example in last week's video. Maybe you are just hiring, 20, 40, 50 people a week to staff a high attrition role. That's okay. There's nothing wrong with that. I don't want anybody, job seeker or recruiter, to look at any of this and go, oh, that sounds terrible. What a horrible company, or what a awful job that must be. Not necessarily. There's all kinds of reasons for volume. There's all kinds of reasons for attrition. There's all kinds of reasons that we backfill roles. So I'm not going to say that it's good, bad, or indifferent. I will say recruiters need to understand it. I also think job seekers need to understand it. So I think if you are a job seeker who is interested in one of these high volume type of roles, that's going to be a question I want to ask. Like, how many people have you hired already? How established is the company, team, organization, whatever, that I'm interviewing with? Is this just like a high turnover environment? And that's okay. And there's nothing wrong with that necessarily. But you want to understand, like, what am I getting into? And if it is something that's brand new, being, very newly kind of stood up, I got to tell you, we catch a lot of flack for using words like ambiguity or saying this is an ambiguous environment. Friends, I use that word all the time. Okay, we are very much, even a few years in, especially with this new, kind of flex towards production, we're very startup-y in certain ways, not always, but there's certain aspects where it's like, oh, yeah, we've never actually done that before. Hold on, we better figure out how to do that, right? And so there's a lot of just ambiguity. Sorry. That we have to swim in. And so a job seeker needs to know that and understand that. And I do coach my candidates on that. Like, hey, you're the first person we're hiring to do a thing. Or, hey, you're joining a team where, we've only had people in this role for 3 months, or we've only been building this for the last 6 months. So I want to give my job seekers and my candidates a heads up, like, this is what you're getting into, right? It's new. We're still working out bugs and kinks, and hey, if you don't, and I even joke with them sometimes, if you don't like your job tomorrow, don't worry, it's going to be different a week from now, right? Because again, we are adjusting and adapting to this new strategy that we're building, and the recruiting strategy has to follow that. So the big takeaway, I think, this week, so I'll kind of leave it there. Hopefully this, again, planted another little layer of the foundation, right, for high volume hiring. But I think most important thing for recruiters to understand about this is you cannot start recruiting until you really understand short-term, long-term problems that we are trying to solve here. Could be as simple as like, hey, we're setting this up for the first time, or hey, this is an ongoing like system that we've just done for 5, 10, 15 years, whichever, doesn't matter, understand that. And then for job seekers as well, what is the actual potential impact here? What am I stepping into? Are there just really well, clearly defined processes and my job is going to be super clear from day one and I'm going to come in and just do my work and go home? Awesome. Or am I coming into something that we've never done this before and I'm going to be part of maybe building the foundation for this team, for this kind of work? Those are a couple of options. There's probably more options I haven't covered yet. Gosh. Anyway, I'm sure there's more. So let me know down below in the comments what else you would add to this or what other questions you might have, but really understanding that foundation of what we're trying to build both on the recruiting side and the job seeker side, I think is going to help set you up for success. And I think even from a job seeker perspective, if you have a better understanding of the problem the company is trying to solve through this hiring, you are better able to prepare for your interview. You're also better able to really make a judgment call on if this is for you or not. Not everyone wants to get into a weird, ambiguous, newly built department. It's hard. It's messy. There's a lot of change. There's a lot of disruption. And that may not be for everybody. That's okay. That's all part of the learning and building process. We're going to make mistakes. We're going to fall down. We're going to just do things that seem crazy and we're going to pivot and do something different. And if that's not you, friends, that's okay. Make sure you're understanding from your recruiters, and recruiters make sure you're understanding from your hiring managers, is this potentially what the environment's going to look like for the short term? And do I really want to do it? All right, I hope that helps y'all. Obviously, seasonal is another, kind of example of this. Make sure you understand, hey, this is a job that's going to last 3 months versus a long-time career move. One more example I just thought of. So I hope that gives y'all some guidance, some clarity on this. And again, just another little foundational piece to this high volume stuff. Next week, we're going to go a little bit deeper and talk about some of the mechanisms that I have built and am building and working with my team. My boss has been absolutely phenomenal at this. She's really just a program manager at heart, I think. Like her way of thinking is, I want to be her when I grow up, okay? Like, she's so good. So we're going to talk a little bit more about that next week. We'll dig into some of those mechanisms and some of those things that we're using to scale this hiring effort. And as always, we'll see you next week.